Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Luke Mardigan, and you are listening to Be Insured, where we talk about business, leadership, and insurance. That way, on your worst day, when you need it the most, you will be insured. You know, life has a really interesting way of opening new doors, and it's always fascinating for me to hear how insurance agents came into the profession. And as you look back, I'm sure listeners, as you look back on your own professional careers, sometimes if you had gone back to 2001 and asked yourself what you'd be doing in 2020, you never would have guessed what you're doing now. And the three men in this room right now are absolutely in that boat. And so I want to pull back the curtain and share the journey of our journey and about how we came into the professional world. And so I'm joined by a very dear friend of mine,
Harrison Gunden,
agent with Farm Bureau Insurance, and of course joined by my awesome co-host
Eric Gestring, the Mardigan Agency.
All right, so this episode is about how law enforcement and military can transition into the private sector, and for us it's how our time serving our country and city ignited a passion for insurance and protecting people. Harrison, you were active duty in the Marine Corps for how long?
for 4.5 years.
4.5 years. You were a mechanic on Ospreys,
Right.
which are those really cool helicopters that take off vertically and can fly like a plane. And Eric, you were active duty in the Navy for how long?
6 years.
And you were a Naval Special Warfare Search and Rescue swimmer? No.
We were the lamest special warfare group in the Navy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was the lamest in the Marine Corps.
You were this swimming warfare.
Yeah.
We're going to breaststroke you to death.
There's a lot of danger with sharks in the water, okay? So,
Yeah. How many swimmers have been bit by sharks before? Rescue swimmers.
I don't know any, but
if it did happen, it'd be really bad.
we had a knife, so.
For those who don't know, I was active. I was a law enforcement officer full time for 8 years in the city of Lansing here in Michigan, and it's a pretty crazy time for law enforcement. And
Right now.
our military is going through a transition phase where we've been in war for 20 years, and we have a lot of those people coming out of the military, and they need something to do that isn't swimming with sharks or flying on helicopters. So, Harrison, I feel like, things are very similar with you and Eric and your stories. Can you talk a little bit about your transition out of the Marine Corps and what led you to your current life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had been in for a while, and I had met this amazing, beautiful woman, and the Marine Corps, I had gone in a little bit late.
Talking about Eric's mom?
Yes. The woman who's now my
Rachel.
wife.
Rachel, yeah, that's right.
I didn't know he was my stepdad.
And it was interesting just because of where I was at in the Marine Corps. I had gone in later. I was in a closed out MOS, so promotion wasn't really on the table. And I'm going, hey, I want to have a family. I want to have a life, and I love serving my country, but I'm going to have to make some changes if I want to continue down the path of being
Exactly how I felt.
Yeah. And so that's really what was the main push that.
Did you have a contract time coming up? I know that you guys signed
mine. I was at the end of my contract and I had been beaten up. You know my story, but for people that don't, I got kind of banged up. My back was the biggest thing. It was either I was going to get medically retired.
Both air crewmen, which Eric, you just sent me an article that air crewmen and back injuries, it's something like 10 times or 20 times the rate of everyone else in the military. So you both had back issues.
Yep. So that being in top of mind, I knew I wasn't going to do 20.
So you didn't want to. You didn't want to renew your contract one more time.
I just walked.
Were you at the end of your contract?
Yeah. So I was almost at the end of mine, and I had the same issue with a back injury, and feet problem. I had a whole bunch of issues, and I knew same thing. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to make 20 years.
At that point, we're also a hazard to our team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's so I actually veered out about 6 months early,
which is
the voluntary early enlistment release program.
Okay.
So I was able to, and I felt comfortable doing it because initially I had been air crew. I got moved to being a Marine Air Ground Task Force Planning Specialist, and served my time doing that. Air crew's 5 years for your base contract, where the other job would have been 4. And I've said, well, I'll split the difference. I don't feel guilty getting out. 6 months early.
You served your country, yes.
Yep.
The reason why, one of the main reasons I asked that is doing 8 years in the police department, I noticed that burnout happened to cops right around 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I know that there's, the military has data. That's all they do is keep track of data.
That's why the regular GPs of the Navy is a 4-year contract.
Yep. Because everyone has their limit, right? Jocko talks about how, people have buckets and, your combat bucket, and once it's full, it's full. You can't make it any bigger. And some people have really big buckets and they can go 20 years direct action raids.
Well, they also fear coming out and going home.
Yeah.
So,
and that bucket's smaller than their combat bucket, right? Well, in my opinion, I think that part of police reform that should be moving forward is that cops go on 4 or 5 year contracts.
Absolutely.
And for the first 4 or 5 years, maybe they're underpaid, but they're overtrained. Mm-hmm. And then if they choose to stay, wonderful. Now they go back into kind of how normal cops live their rest of their career.
And then bonuses for specialties like they did for us.
Exactly.
I mean, all the special warfare guys, I got $15,000 at the completion of rescue summer school.
Right.
The Buds guys got back then, they were like at 6 figures. It was $100K, I think. That's crazy.
We got the title of being Marines.
Yeah. Congratulations. Here's your box of crayons, sir.
Yeah. Red ones taste the best.
I think that model, as far as the ability to be highly trained, highly proficient, and avoid long-term burnout, because what happens, I think a lot of cops stay past 5 years because they top out their contract somewhere between 5 and 8 years, and they're making $50,000, $60,000 a year in Michigan, at least. And you don't want to move careers, but you're burned out. You might not want to do it anymore, but what else are you going to do? And so that's what this episode's about, is helping people who are at that point in their lives, whether in law enforcement or military, move into the private sector. So both of you, either you guys can start. You decide to get out, and what was your first move?
Well, for me, I wanted to go to school. So I went back to college and worked 2 jobs. Luke knows all about this. Yep. So I worked nights at General Motors, days at GNC, became a manager there. Nice. And then at the same time, I was attending LCC, doing my kinesiology
Lansing
degree.
Community College, Yep. And you were a corpsman in the Navy.
So I knew medical, and I was into the physical therapy. I didn't want to be around trauma and all that stuff. I was over that.
Yeah.
I thought physical therapy would be cool. I had a good connection with my physical therapist when I was in, and he kind of told me the pipeline that I should do, and I was all gung-ho, and then they changed it to like a doctorate. And when I was in kinesiology,
you have to go you have to get your bachelor's and then another 4 or 5 years after that.
I'm too effing old, Luke. That's what I said.
He said, my back hurts. My back hurts.
I started doing that security crap, which was a joke.
Essentially, you're kind of trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You weren't completely aimless, but other than the gym, you were pretty aimless.
And then the timing was just good because Dad got sick at that time.
Yep.
That was the deciding factor of the insurance, was Dad. Not just the life insurance, but just understanding insurance. Yeah. In a different way. And Luke sat down with me and was just like, hey, I was thinking about going on my own. And what do you think? Do you think you'd want to do it with me? And I was like, yeah, you know what? I actually was thinking about this stuff and getting licensed, and I got recruited by a few people, and I like what you said, so we ended up getting rolling and never looked back.
Common belief foundationally for both of us, and if you're listening,
was protecting people.
It's protecting people, right, and serving others, right? What's the motto for rescue swimmers?
So others may live.
I can't think of a better way to describe insurance. Mm-hmm. It's if I die, my family gets life insurance so that they could live. I pay so that others may live, right? And that may be me leaving my life insurance on to a charity so that the people involved in that nonprofit can live. It could be a school. Right. It could be a million things, but that's what insurance does is it allows people to continue to live. Mm-hmm. So Harrison, tell us a little bit about your journey after.
So initially I was, I got my CDL and I was driving truck, and I said, hey, I can pay the bills and do this, and Marine Corps taught me how to stay awake for long periods of time.
Yeah, especially with the rumble
and log books aren't that hard to keep.
Yeah.
So
and if military and law enforcement train you in anything, it's how to be bored effectively.
Right, exactly. So I did that initially with the intention that would be a part-time or a short-term thing, whether I figured out what I was going to go to school for or what other type of options I had for a career. Along the way, a good family friend who happened to be a managing partner in Farm Bureau had reached out to me and said, hey, I'd love for you to sit down and talk to me about insurance. I know you'd be great at it. I know before you went into the military, you had that little advertising business you had started when you were a long-haired freak. And he's a family friend. So I said, yeah, I'll sit down and talk. I had no interest in insurance whatsoever initially.
Did you have no interest because of you weren't exposed to it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't exposed to it. Just was not like in the forefront of my mind in any way whatsoever. I sat down, had that meeting, still wasn't that interested. Great family friend, but didn't really pique me that much. I just was like, well, I'll go along with this. It was the next managing partner that I had talked to that really brought that to light for me, and that was, this is an opportunity. I've talked to you, and I know that you value your family and your country and serving and protecting people, and you just talk about it all the time and how much you loved it. And for me, it was like, yeah, well, I don't want to drive truck for the rest of my life.
Right.
And that's a complacent thing. Like Robert Kiyosaki talks about being complacent, mentally.
When you're in the E quadrant.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's where I was, and I didn't want to stay there. And so I said, absolutely, that I can, now that I had that revelation, for me, I was like, absolutely, this is something I can see myself doing, and not just be the sales guy that I thought that all insurance agents were. Now I can be somebody that comes in and serves,
advisor,
and advise. Yep, exactly.
So yeah, in your mind, it was a used car salesman.
Yeah, exactly. And then until I got to that point that I understood more, and I absolutely, that's the passion and drive of why I do it.
It's funny how all of us line up in that same way.
That's why we're friends, right? And that's why we do what we do. And typically, if you're going to be in the military or law enforcement, not everyone, but most of them get into it for the right reasons, right? Like I remember being prepped for my interview at the police department and being told by my mentors, when they ask you, why do you want to be a cop? Don't say you want to serve or you want to protect or you want to keep people safe. Like those are like, everyone answers that. Duh, they know that's what you want. Right. That's why you're there.
Right.
So why do you want to do it? And so I think a lot of people who are active duty or currently in law enforcement can't answer that question anymore. They're not sure why they want to do it.
Right.
They become complacent, right? They're making, with overtime, you might make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year as a cop. Where are you going to go make that? And that was, that's where I was 8 years in, was I was complacent. And what changed my mind was a good friend, Kurt Martins, who actually left the police department to start a church in Texas.
Awesome.
Dear friend of mine, mentor. He turned to me and he said, if the department ever did layoffs, that pink slip would be the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
And in my brain, I will always be a cop. There is no other choice. This is what I've trained my entire life for. Brain was like, what are you talking about? You're a lunatic. And he goes, if that happened, then I know that means that it's now an opportunity for me to leave and go do something else. And I think that would be the best thing that could happen to me, is get a second chance and go do something else.
So that resonated. And then you had injuries too, right?
Yeah. And then I shredded all the ligaments and tendons in my right ankle. I ended up
How much does that change things for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now can you carry out any missions?
Well, I couldn't. It took me 2 years before I ran. I ran on the turkey trot here in Lansing, 5K, and I ran like a 28-minute 5K.
You were literally trotting.
Literally, yeah. In like the academy, I was running like 5:45 miles. So it's like I literally doubled my mile time almost. And it still took me. I still don't run great. I ruck now because I can't run great. So it's amazing how those little factors come in. It's kind of like a mother eagle putting thorns in the nest, saying it's time to get out. Yeah. And right now, there's a lot of thorns in the nest for a lot of cops. And so if you're listening, don't be complacent. There's other opportunities. For me,
reach out.
Yeah, reach out to us. We're happy to help you.
And veterans.
Yep, and veterans. That's what we love to do. We've helped a lot of people. No cost. We don't have like some program or something that we do. The reality is, for me, I realized that my skill set, I'm sure you guys did too, the skill set that you're given in the military or in law enforcement is well served in other areas.
Absolutely.
Writing reports, investigations,
all sorts of things.
Operating within organizations, right?
Leadership.
Yeah.
Management.
How to be led. by good leaders and bad leaders, right? You get a ton.
We know bad leaders,
and yeah, I mean, you get a doctorate in bad leadership, right?
You do.
No, really though, and and like our current police chief here in the city of Lansing, who's my sergeant, he was one of the best leaders that I ever had, Daryl Green, and so you take notes.
My best leader was also named Daryl.
Really interesting. Must be a thing.
Daryl Scott. Yep.
Mine was Luke. Sorry.
Oh,
no, not you. A different
sounds
Luke.
pretty cool.
Luke.
Skywalker.
Luke Ricker. Lieutenant Ricker.
Really?
He was amazing.
What a quickening. So
Lieutenant Commander. Sorry.
You start making notes of these people, and you start going, oh gosh, maybe there is something of value out there. Maybe I have learned lessons that I could apply. And so, for us, it's insurance. It makes sense. You serve, you protect people, you protect their assets, you protect their families, you protect their lives, their income,
their futures.
But there's a million other careers out there that you can go into that your skills are needed and necessary, and the private sector will welcome you with open arms.
Bottom line is do something you're passionate about, that you want to go and do every day, you're excited about. I feel like all of us, it resonates with us.
Yep, and you're not doing any favors being burned out and injured and staying at a job that you don't really want to be at, but you're complacent.
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
a great way of putting that, Harrison. If there's one takeaway for people, what would that be, Harrison?
One takeaway would I say don't be complacent. That's really what resonated with me and what got me where I'm at. And you have to find that motivation. And if you're not finding it where you're at, be a leader somewhere else. Find opportunity. There's tons of opportunity that's always there.
Don't be afraid to change and challenge.
Yep. Don't live in fear.
Yep. The fact that you're doing what you're doing proves that you can take on anything.
Right. And if you're military, law enforcement, you know how to overcome fear. So
100%.
Do it.
They are calm in chaos. Harrison, thank you so much for being on the show today. You can connect with Harrison at the Harrison Gunden Agency on Facebook. Yep. And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at the Mardigan Agency. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Be Insured.